The way we're doing things tonight, there is going to be a PowerPoint, but it will be near the end. It's kind of the flash and the splash at the end. So watch for it, because hopefully it gives all this other stuff that I'm going to be saying a little bit of pointedness and understanding of what this all was leading to as I talk tonight about how somebody can get into trouble just sitting around doing nothing. Now, what does that all amount to? We're going to talk about the body of Jesus Christ some too. And we'll refer to some passages in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and Romans chapter 12 with some scripture readings there. But in the meantime, we're aware that the Lord used the fact that the church is the body of Jesus Christ. And I'm not here to establish that tonight, because we know that, we accept that, and so we don't have to have that proved or taught all over again. There are passages like Ephesians chapter 1, verses 22 and 23 that speak of the lordship of Jesus when it speaks of God having made him to be head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him that filleth all in all. And we know that a body has one head. That's very important. And whenever we get to chapter 4 of Ephesians, it's talking about all the things that have one. He says that there is one body and one spirit. Well, of course, there is the one God and Father above all, who's all in all and through all. But if Jesus Christ is the head of the church, that's iterated in the book of Colossians as well. That time it said that his church, which is the body, so the two are used interchangeably. We see the parallel that 1 Corinthians 12 and Romans 12 use, talking about the different members of the body, and that all of them are dependent on each other, and that in order for the human body to really focus and to perform as it's supposed to do, then it needs what my dad said would have said. It needs to be hitting on all cylinders. It needs everybody to be participating, doing his part, playing his role, performing, stepping up where he needs to. And we spoke some about that this morning, but we're going a little further with that concept this evening. If every member in the body is doing what it's supposed to do, Paul says, as we'll see in Romans chapter 12, then it's we might say, a nice, evenly running machine. And it accomplishes what it is supposed to accomplish. But of course, you know that if you have an engine that's got 8 cylinders and 5 of them are all that are running, then very quickly it's obvious that things are not being what they ought to be. They're certainly not doing what they could do, ought to do, should be able to do. Or you have a pickup truck that's an 8-cylinder and you start to pull a loaded trailer, you probably not pull very well, certainly not very fast, because you're not getting all the power that you ought to be able to be generating for the tow package. You see, no wonder the Lord would say that the body, where the ear can't say to the eye, I'm not important because I'm not an eye, and the eye can't say I'm not important to the body because I'm not an ear. Of course, the foot and the hand can't have that argument either, that each of them has their own role. We see those physical, overt things all the time. But the human body is a little bit more complicated and fascinating than just talking about those elements of the body that we see and have in the open all the time and are conscious of all the time. I decided this week that I'd just do a little research on interesting things about the human body, because I believe that when the Lord said that the church is the body of Jesus Christ, it's more than just saying we are the feet and the hands and the eyes and the voice of the church, but that there is a deep-seated meaning in that, and that the church is more complicated than and maybe that's not a good word, maybe it's more fascinating and has more elements to it than we ever really counted. are considered, and we may not count it important enough. Well, here, this particular heading had 40 interesting things about the human body. One was that the human body, of course, consists of literally millions and millions of cells to make one body. That there are within our body over 100,000 miles of blood flow. I knew I was big, but I didn't know that there was 100,000 miles of blood flow. I met a man back in 2013, I think. And one of the things he said, introducing himself, was he said, "I'm PVC man. I've got 9 miles of PVC in my body." And I was quite impressed. But if he's got 100,000 of the other kind of blood flow, then 9 miles doesn't impress me much anymore. However, he's still living, so the 9 miles is doing its job. I didn't know that. It doesn't matter a whole lot, I guess, unless you're in the mattress business, but the human body sheds, so they say, over 600,000 skin particles per hour. I wonder why we need to vacuum a mattress. Wow, looks like it would mound up after a while there. The brain, just existing, creates enough electricity that it would be able to operate a light bulb. Now, mind you, I didn't go far enough to say, okay, what wattage? I didn't. The point is not the size of the light, but just that this is going on. Here's one, and I know you're going to remember this one. It's not the prettiest part of what I have to say, but it said that the average human body will create enough saliva in one lifetime, that's all we got, to fill 2 swimming pools. Now, I wanted to say, what size are the pools? But they didn't give that detail. I think they were trying to say it's a bunch. Amazing that human body's doing that. Here's an interesting one. They're always talking about DNA and genetics and things these days, and all the police shows and so forth, and proving who's who, and so many things are genetic. A box of cornflakes that you buy in the store has more genes in it than your body does. I'm not sure who counted. Here's an interesting one to me. Our human body can't digest grass, but the gastric juices in our stomach will dissolve metal. The acid will dissolve metal. And the acid is strong enough that if you put it on your skin surface, it will burn a hole in your skin. But it maintains itself in your stomach without causing any problem, because it's doing its business there of digesting, even if metal comes in. We're born with over 300 bones, but by the time you get the age of some of us, you have less than 300, more like 290. I knew it was getting shorter, but I didn't know that it was bones that were disappearing. Some parts of the human body we proudly display, and others we keep covered all the time. Some parts we kind of sense and feel. We know they're there. We can feel our heartbeat. We can feel our pulse. And I think people who have, this is just a rumor for me, that people who have kidney stones can tell that they have them. There's pain that's associated with those parts. We can tell some parts of the body are functioning, but for the most part, we just assume the body to perform. And we don't get up and think, I got to keep my heart going. Heart bump, pump, pump, pump. Those things just keep on going, and everything does its part. With that make sense in Paul's analogy. If everything keeps doing its part without having to be told, hey, pump, hey, flow, those kinds of things, then the process works. And when he gets around to talking about every member in the church having certain gifts, we may call them talents or abilities, or even opportunities, and if each one is doing that he is equipped to do, then the church moves smoothly, like your human body. Just keeps on going, usually, until there's something that causes a malfunction. The human body is susceptible, though, to many diseases. Lots of things can happen to it. Some of those diseases it is not susceptible to. Your body may have immune system that will overthrow things that other people get sick from. In fact, one of the closing things that they said was this. I think I'd read this somewhere else before, but it said that there are many of us, maybe some of you who are sitting here tonight, and maybe me, who have had cancer during our lifetime and never knew it because our immune system won the battle. The immune system fights outside interference. It fights it wildly, as much as it can, is equipped to do. And it sometimes just wins, and you never know that you had even cancer. That's fascinating. The church is designed also to protect itself through the Word of God and through people knowing what is right and what is wrong and what should be practiced and what shouldn't be practiced. And part of that is designed to keep from the outside interference that might infect and influence, distract and destroy the church. But whenever those things, and you could, if we made a detailed study of that with the instructions, for instance, that Paul said, here's what you do when there's a troublemaker or when there's someone who teaches false doctrine and all those kinds of things. If you follow the prescription, as it were, that the scriptures give on how to deal with that, quite often those things are dealt with in such a way that no one ever really knows because they're managed with truth and right. The truth is our immune system in the church, and it is our banner to teach and keep ourselves close. When Paul was speaking to the elders of the church at Ephesus over in Miletus, he said, take heed to yourselves and to the flock over which the Holy Ghost has made you overseers to feed the church of God. For he said, after my departure, grievous wolves will come in, speaking perverse things, and they will draw away many from among you. And even he said, from among yourselves, from you elders I'm talking to. Some of you may do that as well. So the importance of us understanding that analogy that the body is the body of Jesus, it's spiritual, but it has all these facets that start to shed light on the big picture. So some of those diseases that might threaten us are almost conquered, and some others we don't understand at all. There are new diseases that come all the time that threaten. When I was a boy, some of you were young people at the same time, there came a word that was new to our vocabulary. Great threaten, polio. Many were afflicted and many died. Eventually, when I was 23 years old, I believe, a man named Salk produced a vaccine that was accepted by the Food and Drug Administration, and I took the Salk vaccine orally, and I'm immune now to polio. But polio wasn't the only thing that could threaten life. A few years later, the HIV virus was, maybe it was latent somewhere or in active in other countries long before. But with the amount of travel and the speed of travel and the interaction of international groups of people in today's world, the HIV virus looked at one point like it might wipe out the human population in our lifetime. And whereas we knew nothing about it to begin with, now there's some control that's in it. The thing that's scary is that there must be some other new diseases that haven't yet been discovered, that are lying somewhere latent and may surface at any moment in time, as are those who always like to teach strange doctrines and divide and conquer the body of Jesus Christ, the church. They lie in wait, as the lion seeking whom he may devour may be. Some of those diseases are, in fact, more like serial killers. They come on the scene and they kill a whole lot of people, and then they seem to disappear. And years later, generations or even 100 years later, you know that we're having trouble with the plague again in this age. They just reappear. And they even have, as in serial killers, they also have copycats that make you think it's one thing and it's something else, as some people teaching almost the truth might also cause destruction and spiritual death in the kingdom. And so this church as the body, I want us to read these passages, and I don't think they're ones that are unfamiliar to you at all, but in light of what we're covering here, I think it's important to read them. The one in 1 Corinthians is the longer one. Hopefully I can keep my vision and my glasses and the light here, so that beginning in verse 4, no, let me go down to 12. Verse 12 of 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and following. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all of the members are of that one body, though they are many, there's still one body, and so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Gentiles, slaves or free, and all were made to drink of the one Spirit. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. And if the foot should say, because I'm not of the hands, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not the eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? And if the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God has arranged the members in the body, each one of them, as He chose. And if all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. And then he goes on again to talk about what the eye cannot say, cannot exclude itself. And the ultimate intent of that in verse 25 is that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care one for another. Chapter 12 of Romans speaks of basically the same thing, and so let me not read that tonight. But if we started, this is one of the things, incidentally, that was a subject for discussion when Marvin and I went recently to Tennessee for the seminar. If we started to discuss with you as a group, if we turned this into just a discussion session this evening, and let's say I was presiding in the meeting, and I'd say, what are your greatest interests in the kingdom? What do you like best? What is it that you like best to do? If you're going to be asked to work in a certain ministry, which ministry is it that would appeal most to you? And some people would say, well, I I just can't get out and talk to other people. I'm very nervous around strangers and introducing, and so let me have something that doesn't require me to speak. Another person would say, I just love to talk to people. I've never met a stranger, and I'll just be glad to be a front person and all that. So we talk, and some people say, I'm good with my hands, and I can create something if you need something built, or if you need someone. Let's say someone's sick and they can't clean their house, and somebody may say, I can do that. And food's needed, and certain ones of you ladies, and maybe a man or two, are famous for certain dishes that you prepare that are taken to those people. And all of those are parts of ministries and benevolence, and all of it's important in lifting up the church. And not any of it's more important than any of the rest of it, because the Lord equipped us to do what we can do, and when we give ourselves, then that's what happens. And as the New Testament uses the term sometimes as gifts, in some cases it's speaking specifically of the miraculous gifts that were given in the first century, but it also speaks in other senses of what our innate abilities are, how we are born, and what we bring to the table. It's amazing if you can bring a couple of hundred people or 100 people together and everybody puts on the table what he can do, you can't even use it all, because there are so many talents in a group of people that compose a church. And so people like to do certain things. They have special interests, and they rely on other people to get the other things done. You ever notice that? That a person will take an assignment, he worked very, very hard on that, but he doesn't touch other areas because he's relying on other people to work very, very hard on that. When you speak of the term involvement minister that we were going to study about over there, you might sense real quickly that his business is to try to get everyone involved in the local church. For everyone to find something, I like that. Yeah, that's what I can do. I want to. I'm looking for a ministry. Sign me up for that, and I'll do that. But they say, hopefully we're not like this, but they say that many churches function on an 80-20-80 plan. And that is 80% of the people are watching 20% of the people do 80% of the work. They like to come on Sunday morning. They like it all to be prepared and ready for them. They want it to be laid out, and then they want to go home. And they may not want to come back till the next Sunday or 2 weeks from then, whatever's convenient for them. But when they come, they expect it to be ready. They expect everything to be in order and for someone to have taken care of that. What if we came to the building for worship on the Lord's Day morning and the cleaning hadn't occurred? Now, you know as well as I do, and because of a longer amount of experience, you know that with Vonda, that's not going to happen. But I'm just saying, what if you came and it wasn't? What if there was no worship plan? There was no worship leaders. There were nobody assigned to lead prayers, lead singing. And the minister wasn't in town, and there was nothing planned. You just came, and it was a blank page there. There were no what if in the church regularly there's no elders, there's no minister, there's no deacons, there's no one who's carrying it on all of the time? If there were no announcements made, we have to have our announcements. Preachers like to joke about the fact that we have to have some announcements so it will be a scriptural worship. Some people would just think, if we don't get up and announce some things, it just doesn't seem right. But what if there was no one to do that? There were no announcements planned, and we didn't know anything about what was happening with anybody else. If there were no financial reports in the course of, I think the last 10 days, I received a call from someone who said that, and I know this person, I know the circumstance, so, and she'll be listening to this before the week is over. So I'm not going to point in any direction. But the individual had been once a member of a congregation and was gone for several years and back again. And she said, Willie, I've been back, I believe she said 14 years. And until last week, this church never had a financial statement. So the people in the congregation never knew how things are going and where we're spending the money and what's happening. How would you like that? Nobody did it. Nobody provided it. There were never any business meetings or any budget plans or opportunities that were shown. If there were no plans for evangelism, for benevolence, for any edification programs, if somebody would be in trouble for that, wouldn't they? Somebody would be blamed. Sometimes that's how somebody gets in trouble, sitting around doing nothing. We are assuming that somebody else is going to do it. We all know that assuming is a dangerous exercise, and yet we often assume these things will get taken care of. Procrastination is a deadly sin, and apathy is ultimately a fatal condition. We have to care. We have to all find our place and do our thing. Become committed to this church. When we meet on Sunday night, we need us all to be here. We need us to support what we're doing. Last Sunday, Betty, I think I said that Betty came home so excited because of the number of people who came to support the singing. People in our congregation. Attaboy. That's what we ought to do. Each member in each congregation of the church is unique. Consequently, each church is unique, but God planned the church so that each one is autonomous. So we have different personalities. Paul, in writing to Timothy, in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 20 and 21, that's funny for a reason, said that in a great house that there are all kinds of, we'll say, implements or bowls, whatever. Some are made out of gold, some out of silver, some out of clay. And some of them are for exhibition and for use in public, and some of them are private and unspeakable uses that they have. But every one of them in the house serves its purpose. And so everything is important to the good of the household. And he's saying that's all of us have something we can do. No wonder there's so much said in the scriptures about the subject of unity. In today's culture, any church is going to have to deal very specifically with the concept of unity, because we have a great deal of diversity in our communities, and likely we have a great deal of diversity in our congregations. We probably ought to have more diversity in our congregations than we do, but people generally like to assemble with people who look like them, talk like them, make about the same amount of money they do, are culturally similar, and that doesn't really give the church the whole face of the community when we are, in that sense, segregated and separated. But it isn't something that's forced on anyone, but that's kind of what is happening. And someone might visit us and feel that because we have fewer minorities than we have people who are Caucasian, some might think we don't welcome anyone else, just looking at our crowd. And so they might think they're not welcome here, or they might think there's a problem with us because of that. And that's not the case, not whatsoever. But for us to keep unity, we have to deal with diversity and have some widespread understanding of what's happening in the culture in which we live. There are the generational issues. We have difficulty talking across 20-year periods or 30-year periods. And many people think that a man my age can hardly say hello to a millennial person because I just can't understand them. And agreed, there's some things I don't understand. I'm really pretty sure there's some things about me they don't understand too. And we need to get along. We need to love each other and work in the same church. There are the cultural differences, and then there's always our own perceptions. Various people like certain projects, and some don't. Some people like to work with certain people. So the variables make us very different, and one member's suffering ought to distract from the well-being of all of us. And there's often too much to do. By that, put the marks on to do. There's much to do about who does what. And I see people that often in churches start to have power struggles because they're doing my job. They're doing what I like to do. I've always done that. Where'd they come from? Come in here and start doing my job. How come? Why'd they let them do that? Frankly, I'll take it out away from us a bit. I've seen that with specificity happen more often in churches that use mechanical instruments of music. When a new preacher comes to town and his wife plays the piano, but the former preacher's wife didn't, and so some lady in the congregation got to be the pianist. And now the new lady wants to be the pianist, and you have a problem on your hand. That is an important concept in the mind of people. And that's just a way of kind of shifting it away from us, but we got to deal with that ourselves in order to maintain unity, not the piano, but the issue of people owning certain projects and jobs and making sure that we all are welcome and we all are involved. People have special interests. They have certain pet projects, and people do not choose individually to do everything. You choose something, but not everything. Okay, that brings me to a short story of 4 people. And it is with these 4 people that we'll conclude the lesson that you may think is the strangest one I ever tried to do, however long I stay here. The short story involves everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. And the story is that there was an important job to be done, and everybody thought that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. And somebody got angry because it was everybody's job, but nobody realized that anybody wouldn't do it. And it ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. Now that's just too real, isn't it? And now you know why I said all that other before. Unity is absolutely essential. Harmony, love, grace, and consideration, but involvement and commitment, participation, and use of the talents that God has given us in order to magnify and glorify the Jesus who died on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins and by his blood purchased the church. If you're subject to the invitation of Jesus tonight to be baptized for the remission of sins, or confess sin in your life, that you'd like us to pray with you about whatever your need may be, we invite you to come while we stand now and sing.